Thank you for this opportunity to be here during Huddle Global 2024. It's always an inspiration for me to meet young people, especially the startups and companies in many sectors, especially tech sectors, assembled here and talking about the possibilities and also their future visions. So, in fact, I thought that I will share with you some of the space vision part and also the rise of the space tech companies in this domain. See, always we start with a slide on our history of what we did in space in the past. Of course, it's always great to know that we have started in this land very close to this venue. The launch program of rockets started there. We still continue that journey with an impressive number of satellites and launch vehicles that we made and launched. Of course, we celebrated the 60th anniversary of launching recently. But this journey continues, but it is not limited to those small rockets that you have made and launched way years back. But the current goals are much beyond what we did in the past in terms of the small rockets, etc. But recently we did commissioned one study to look at what we really did in the last 60 years in terms of its impact in the space sector, in terms of the economy, in terms of the revenues that we generated, in terms of the industries that we mentored to become spacefaring, converting us into a spacefaring nation. And if you really look at in terms of the economic value of what we did, it is not very impressive in terms of the overall space economy. And our contribution has not been very moderate in the past. In terms of employment and in terms of public fund also, we have some good number compared to the numbers that we invested in terms of the government funding. As you know, the space has been always a government funded program, meeting the national requirements and strategic requirements. But if you really look at one figure which is very impressive is for every $1 that we invested, the return of investment is something like 2.54. This has been quoted enough in the media in terms of direct and indirect benefits that has come. But this has been well known, but it is in terms of a proper study. This has not in the domain till now. But what we look for in the future is something beyond this, and I will explain that part when I come to some of the slides later. If you really look at the space ecosystem in this country, we have the Department of Space as a nodal Government of India entity to look after the entire space sector, with the new entities like the InSpace and NSIL taking prominence than ISRO in the current days. I think all of you know ISRO, the Space Research Organization, which is the research and development organization. But we have now the InSpace, which is helping the startups and companies who want to get into space domain. And we also have the public sector undertaking, the NSIL, which is doing the business side of the space, which has been done by Antrix in the past, but now it is taken over by NSIL to do. And we have the autonomous institutions. And we have different domains of work in technology domains, right from the applications to the human space flight. Now, if you look at the Indian space policy, which has been released recently, something very, very phenomenal event that has happened. Because right from the inception of space program, we have never thought about releasing a space policy for Government of India. But once it happened after the space sector reform in 2020, we have different stages of work that is now being done in terms of the space policy, the creation of the InSpace and delineation of the work of all these entities. And also we are building up the space activity bill, which is important to connect with the global space ecosystem and how the regulatory environment is existing globally and how the rules and regulations will apply to the new actors, which are non-governmental actors coming into this, as well as the foreign investors that are likely to come to the space sector. And the goal of this space policy is generally to look at how we can expand the space ecosystem, especially in terms of the economy. We know about the numbers now. We have a share of only 2% in the global economy of something like $500 billion US. Would like to expand it substantially, and this is possible only with the private ecosystem coming in. And also we want to look at how we can create businesses around the work that we have done till now. So focusing on all this, we looked at what are the elements of this space policy and how we can support in each of these domains. I will explain a little bit about each of them quickly and how the new space actors can come and how ISRO is going to work in its tech domain, especially in terms of R&D and research, as well as exploration in a big manner coming days, so as to create a very inspiring dialogue between the people of this country and space program, so that there is sufficient possibility for startups and companies to create a value, economic value out of the work which they are doing. So let me first tell about the applications. I think all of you know about the application sector. We deal with the communication currently, all the 13 satellites that we are currently working on, 10 of them with NSIL, 3 with ISRO now, and many just now launched one GSAT, which was just now launched with the SpaceX N2. That also goes with NSIL. We support most of the space-based domain connectivity for terminals, as well as for internet services, as well as mobile backhauling and many other activities. Broadcasting, of course, is one of the important domain. Remote sensing is another major area where we support most of the activities related to natural resource monitoring, the meteorological observations, environmental observations, which are very keen, important areas as far as the nation is concerned. We also do a lot of geospatial services, both for ministries and departments as well as for private. Disaster management is one important domain. And of course, the navigation is an important area. All of you know about the NAVIC, but we are planning to expand it and also become more into civilian domain. Recently, we have moved entire NAVIC to the strategic domain, but we keep some part of it to the civilian domain. We are planning to expand it in the coming days. Of course, one of the important points which I want to share with you is the current announcement of expansion of the space sector. Possibly you would have never thought about such a great amount of expansion and investment from the government side in space in any time in the past. Typically, the money that has been announced by the government goes almost 50,000 crores for next 5 years or so. It's a huge money that going to be invested to create capability in this sector, building satellites, building launch vehicles, looking at human spaceflight program expansion, as well as human travel to moon. And all of this requires many new technologies to be developed, and it requires association with industries and startups in a big way. Our goal is that through this sort of investment that is coming into space sector from government, we will have a corresponding rise in private ecosystem as well as industries to take up a due share of it, not to really share the 50,000 crores, but really put your own money and create businesses on which that you will be able to expand our space economy substantially, as that has been shown in the slide. I'll tell you some of the numbers that we have achieved so far in terms of the satellites. We have 50 plus satellites now in orbit for communication, remote sensing, navigation, Earth observation, as well as science missions. But for a nation like us, which is huge in area as well as in population, I consider this number is not a very impressive number. 50. I think in my estimate, this should have been 500. So if you really have to reach some number like that in terms of satellites and constellations, I think we need to work hard in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of creating a need first for it, and then a base here where we can have a production of satellites as well as launches to happen in quick succession. Why I tell this is these numbers are important. For example, if you look at the revisit that we need to achieve for many of the support that we are giving, for example, disaster, or even strategic communication, strategic observation, I think the capacity that we have is just not enough. Though there is announcement recently, there are certain numbers, but I believe that those numbers need to be increased at least multifold in the coming days. We look at how we can do that with the support of many of the stakeholders. Of course, this story is very important for you. All of us going to moon and landing there, soft landing on the moon has always been an inspirational journey. And I want to tell you that this continued to be one of the very small part of our work, going to moon. But it is always very interesting and inspiring for everyone to look at it as a technology accomplishment. The Chandrayaan 1, 2, and 3, all three has been really giving us a lot of strength in terms of handling satellite development, building more and more autonomy into it, building more and more complex systems into it, and making the satellites more miniature and compact in the go. So that is what I look at it from in terms of technology perspective. But it has a long-term perspective in terms of exploration that we want to take up in the due course. One of the important points that we accomplished in the last year is the mission of Chandrayaan 3, Aditya L1, and XPOSAT. I think never in the history of ISRO we have been looking at exploration as a major theme. We always looked at communication, remote sensing, navigation, and such societally relevant topics as one of the key focus. But I think the focus has a little bit shifted from that to the exploration, because it's very important for us to look at this as a spacefaring nation and dedicate some amount of our work and time into this. That's why there is a refocus on some of this mission, looking at moon missions, looking at the sun and understanding its impact on space weather, trying to study the black holes and its science using XPOSAT. I think all of this happened because of some of the early work that has been done in ISRO in terms of creating those scientific capability to build instruments and launching them in year 2023. And we would like to continue with these new missions that are going to coming up in the future. In terms of launch capability, we have been developing rockets in the past. The PSLV, the GSLV, LVM-3 has been a huge success, though it has gone through years of development cycles. They are currently operating with certain production capability. We recently made the SSLV development complete and we have handed over to industry. Now NSIL has already placed orders for 15 of SSLV for production with ISRO. We are also going to have a new vehicle called NGLV development initiated with approval of the government right now, and we look at whether we can develop it in the next 6-7 years. But here we look at how we can bring down the cost of access, bringing the reusability, more greener propulsion, etc. into this. And we would like to have this rocket scaled up to make the ultimate human missions to moon possible at some point in time. So this is a journey that we have been going, and in the process, some of the rockets which we developed in the past will retire and new rockets will take its shape. I think it's natural evolution with respect to technology, cost effectiveness, production friendliness, and many other elements coming into it, rather than just the capability alone or the payload alone, and many other economics elements will come into building rockets in the future. Gaganyaan continues to be one of the important domain where we want to create the capability to send humans to space. Of course, we have been working on this for the last 4+ years, but all of you know that working on 4 years is just not enough for achieving this capability. We need to develop many technologies, and many of those technologies we want that were not forthcoming from many spacefaring nations, and we had to develop it internally. And this process is on, and I am hoping the first unmanned or uncrewed mission will take place possibly by the beginning of this year. Currently the rocket integration is going on and all the facilities and systems are getting ready for it. We also work on technologies in a big way. We have been having this focus in the past, but after the space sector reform, we realized that it is very important for us to focus on advanced technologies and not just work on very comfortable levels of technologies and do some operational launches and building satellites. But we wanted to hand over all this operational work to industries and focus on technologies. So we identified large number of technologies in many centers and funded them so as to work on them in a very focused manner and inject all these technologies into satellites and launch vehicles in a progressive manner. It involves materials, fundamental research on electronics, quantum, communication like software-defined radios, and many other elements that will go into various systems. I am not going into that, but I will tell you that recently we announced 100 topics that can be done in industries, and we wanted industries to take up development of technologies and systems for rockets and satellites. This is the first time ISRO is announcing such an opportunity to industries to take up. And I'm very happy to tell you that at least 60 of them have been identified to be taken up by industries, and we have shortlisted them, and we will be soon signing contracts or MOUs with them for taking up this on a funded research development in industries from ISRO. So this is the very first time that we have such a scheme. We also have a new scheme called user-funded satellite scheme, where earlier the funding came from the government, and now no longer the funding comes from the government. It comes from the users. So ministries or departments or users of the government of India identifies the need, and we aggregate the need, and then each of them share the money based on the type of data that they will consume. So we have ministries and departments coming forward, and we have an integration mechanism. And many of the satellites now we are currently working on, we are all aggregated based on this user demand aggregation. So this is a new model in terms of the how satellites can be built and launched. And this model will continue, and possibly we'll find out whether new private users will come into it rather than government alone in the future. So this is something which we would like to work with NSIL. Recently, I want to tell you that GSAT N2 satellite is actually used by private companies, and the users have been aggregated, their contracts have been taken over by NSIL, and they built it by their own funding, and ISRO is building it for them. So there's a complex model now coming up, how to build and launch satellites and launch vehicles in the future. If you look at the communication segment, the demand in the communication segment is not growing big. We have a transponder capacity right now with the satellites, and we look at leasing some of the satellite capacity from foreign satellites and provide the services here. Recently, InSpace announced that we are allowing private operators to come into Indian skies and provide services, and this is a new change. And possibly this will increase availability of transponders in this sector. But it also comes with many other challenges of preserving some of the national assets in the skies, and also allowing Indian companies to build and launch satellites in a competitive manner with other companies that are going to come into Indian space. So of course this requires a little more policy discussion, how we can grow this sector. But I want to tell you that some of the Indian companies have now come up and taking responsibilities to build their own communication satellite and launch and provide services over Indian territory. This is a new thing, and possibly you will hear some announcements in another week or so on which are those companies who is going to come up and take up this responsibility. Recently we had a launch of GSAT N2, which is an in-space owned satellite launched by Falcon 9. GSAT N1 has already been launched and in service now. And they are building the next satellite, GSAT N3, to be launched soon, and it's already, all the users are onboarded. Currently the building of the satellite is going on, and I'm hoping that this satellite will be launched by ISRO only, and we will not be able to go outside to launch it, though there is enough demand for us to go outside. But we are assisting to increase our payload capability so that we can launch the satellite from Indian soil itself. Of course, now I would like to speak about the space vision, which I mentioned in the past, in the previous slide, about the goal of building a capability in exploration in the next many years. Starting this year onwards, we have already got announcement of the space station, the first module of Bharatiya Antariksha Station, the building of the NGLV, and also the continuation of the human space program has already been announced. But this is not really going to lead to the ultimate landing of the moon unless we have more programs announced in due course of time. We have defined the whole scheme of how we have to get approvals and money and funding to take this forward in building the space station, but I believe it will be forthcoming with the progress of work that we are going to achieve in the next 5-10 years of time. But this is really an exciting time for us, building space station first time for India, and we are looking at collaborative work with other spacefaring nations, how we can have joint missions, how we can cooperate in terms of standardization and use of space stations, etc. I think possibly you know that there are space stations coming up in private in US and other nations, including Russia. They are also proposing a new space station now. Possibly many other nations will come forward to collaborate and work with us, especially industries who have an interest in going to space and work on new technologies. So this is an interesting area for us. That's why we have announced right now the Gaganyaan program will continue. The human spaceflight program is essential to build space stations and maintain it. So the first part of the space station will be launched by 2028. We also announced two important exploration missions, the Chandrayaan 4 and Venus Orbiter mission. Now this is going to be important for us because we ultimately want capability to go to moon and come back. That will be proven using Chandrayaan 4. Venus, of course, has been a project that we have been waiting to get approval for last many years, especially with looking at the science of the Venus is interesting for all of us. And the rocket, which is going to take us to the moon one day. So we looked at the phases in which the new programs will take us, and these phases are very well identified in terms of the timelines and in terms of the funding. Of course, I am not sharing all those information in this presentation, but the first phase of what is needed has already been funded, which will be taking us to next step of it at appropriate time. One of the important goals for us is to bring down the cost of access to space substantially from the past. We have had a certain amount of cost in the PSLV, which is currently very high in comparison to what is being offered by the new players in space. But of course, PSLV continue to remain as an important launcher with a certain global reach. It is still in demand. The next launch of PSLV is scheduled on the first week of December. And it's also for a customer from European Space Agency, and they are bringing their Proba 3 satellite for launch on board PSLV. So you can understand, this class of rocket, there are not many available in the world to do the launch services. The GSLV is also still operating, and many launches are scheduled for launches of our NAVIC satellite and many others, including NISR, NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar. And when it came to LVM3, we are able to bring down the launch cost substantially, but with the NGLV, our goal is to bring down the cost really low. through various engineering interventions. And we are also building new launch pads. Even at Sriharikota, Satish Dhawan Space Center, we are trying to build a new launch pad, the third launch pad. And also near Thoothukudi, we have a new launch pad identified and we have started construction of it. Possibly in 2 years of time, it will be ready for launches to support new startups and companies developing small rockets. This is a Bharati Antariksha Station architecture we have now finalized, which will be almost a 50-ton spacecraft. And we hope that the first module can be launched early 2028 and then operate it with the uncrewed or robotic means. Possibly we have to add new modules and then make it human rated by end of 2035 also, when all the modules will be launched and the whole space station will become operational. So that's a timeline that we have set. But I can tell you that all the technologies which are meant for space stations are not readily available with us at this moment. But we have identified what all things need to be developed, what all things we need to acquire from others. I think the process is already started and hoping that this process will continue to make us the first launch happen by 2028. We also look at how this space station, once it comes operational, will add value in terms of the research and technology development that are taking place in various domains like microgravity experiments, bioastronautics work, and many other development possibilities that are there. And this dialogue between various stakeholders in this science and technology domains in microgravity and space environment is something which we would like to accelerate in the coming days so as to create a very active research ecosystem around a platform that is a space station. Possibly you know that International Space Station is even today being used heavily by researchers and developers across the world. Especially industries are funding many of the research activities on ISS, but ISS has grown too big to maintain very cost effectively. That's why there is a need to get disposed of and go for a very low cost and manageable space station by many nations. We also have an international collaboration agreement with many nations. I think this is something very interesting thing and we continue to engage this. I am not going into the details of each of the engagements and they go in technology in terms of or political interactions or diplomatic interactions, as well as some of the support services that we give to many of our friendly nations. Space has always been one of the important domain where become part of the many of the high-level dialogue that take place, and we continue this interaction and engagement throughout. Some of the result of this has been really good for us, especially in terms of acquisition of technologies. But right now we have reached a level we can actually collaborate very equal terms with nations like the one which you know about the NASA ISRO synthetic aperture radar is an example of how such a high-end spacecraft can be built by two agencies. The Trishna is another satellite which we are building with a French agency called CNES. And we also have a satellite called G20 satellite, which is an Indian satellite for G20 nations, and Lunar Polar Exploration Mission with JAXA as one of the collaborative missions between Japan and India. We look at many other applications other than the earlier one mentioned, like the automatic identification, which is a very important area where we want to use satellites for large-scale identification of aircraft, ships, and many other devices. We have launched a payload and found that to be very good. And looking at how we can build a constellation to support even IoT applications using a low altitude satellite constellation, which is going to be very important for us. And currently we are looking at how a small satellite constellation can serve this purpose, and we are already in discussion with many stakeholders to launch such a constellation. Our NAVIC is one of the important segment we have been working in the past. Right now we have 9 satellites working in this domain, but at least 4 of them are non-functional because of many failures and early technologies that gone into that. But the new technologies like the atomic clock, which is now our own atomic clock, has gone into the satellite and no more failures are expected. Our atomic clock is doing fantastically well in the satellite which we launched recently. And we are going to have subsequent launches of the NAVIC with our Indian clock and also with the new frequency bands called L1, which will make NAVIC available to your mobile phones without any additional chipsets. So this is a goal that we have set for ourselves. It has to be completed in another 1.5 years or so. 4 more satellites are to be launched, and I want to tell you that at least 3 of them are currently in building, and we will be launching them, at least 2 of them next year. And this is a goal to expand further beyond our boundary of India, and we want to convert it to a global constellation. And currently we have an architecture how to do that, keeping the GEO intact and also a MEO constellation which will support such an architecture. And this is very important, how to work out this constellation, derive some economic activity around this NAVIC, like the GPS do. And especially the commercial exploitation of NAVIC is an important domain we need to work out in the coming days. We also work on new technologies like the quantum key distribution satellite. This is a one which we already started working on, primarily to look at how to encrypt the terrestrial links, also on software-defined radio satellites. The impact of space sector reforms since 2020, after announcement of the space policy in 2023, I think we have been seeing a real increase in interest in space sector with the number of space companies coming up. But I must thank you, it's not just because of ISRO this has really happened, it has been a global phenomena happening across the world, and we have understood the dynamics and moved our policy towards enabling this such a growth in the space ecosystem. And many of the announcements, I think it has been very clear, the policies of ISRO and Government of India has changed in a manner that we will support space companies, will help them with the knowledge and facilities that we have. And this is really caused large number of industries to come up in space sector, both big and small. Some of the examples are really interesting. I think you must be knowing that the Skyroot and Agnikul did their suborbital launches, one with a solid rocket, another with a liquid engine. Some satellites have been launched by some companies, and many of them are now working on the space sector. For example, at least 4 of the rocket companies are there, and at least 5 satellites companies are created enough infrastructure in this country to build their own satellites. Some of them have already started building and launching. One of the companies is working on space situational awareness activities, and they have launched their telescopes and observational platforms and also tools to help space debris management. At least 2+ companies are working on space operation services. At least 2+ companies are working on space propulsion development and design, and many on geospatial services, and much more on components and subsystem design, development and supply. But we have a traditional set of companies who are working in the segments of components manufacturing, supply for ISRO and many others. The ecosystem that we have built here is enough to start off from this point, but then what we look for is innovation, new ideas, business opportunities, etc., that need to be worked out based on the space deliverables, basically. It's not just building the system, we need to create markets and applications where these users will be able to find business opportunities. This continues to be a major challenge for us. We also want to create big space players in this country, like somebody who will be able to build and launch rockets. But this is not an easy journey. For example, if you want to transfer a rocket to a private company to build and launch, we have been working on it for a long time, but then it's not an easy thing at all. Currently we have given contracts to L&T and HAL to hand over the PSLV production. They are working on it for the last 2 years. And we are hoping that the first launch of this PSLV, which is going to be built by them, will be happening in 2025, first quarter, second quarter time frame. We are also working on an SSLV technology transfer process, and it's almost reaching the final stage. The offers are going to be decided, and the contract will be awarded to a company to take on the technology and build at least 2 rockets using our own support, then later build it on their own. We also announced a policy of a private-public partnership model for launch vehicle Mark III to be built by private consortia. And this also has been tendered, and offers have been received, and some of them are really good to look at, and possibly this will also be announced in 1 or 2 months' time. So it's going to be an exciting time to work with multiple rockets to come to the private companies. But it's also going to be a huge task on ISRO side to handhold and support and teach companies how to handle complex system of building rockets and produce them with high reliability. Another area is the geospatial data. I think all of you know that we have huge amount of data for the last 30+ years that we have built over years, and this is a huge repository of images and data. And we continue to collect a huge amount of data every day basis with the ground stations. And this data is being used only by us right now, and a little bit of data dissemination take place for the companies. And we already announced that we are going to have entire data moved to a private ecosystem, and entire data will be moved to an industries to add value and then provide services to customers. And this will really change the whole of ecosystem. Recently, geospatial policy has also come, allowing up to 5-meter resolution to be made available free. This is already operational, and higher resolution will be made at a nominal cost. And we have seen huge amount of data downloading take place after this policy, and we hope that this will really increase the utilization of data substantially. Another area is technology transfer. We look at how industries can benefit from the technology transfer in various ways, either to handhold with ISRO to produce and supply components for us, or to use it as a base on which they can build further, or even to use it for their own use. And many models of technology transfer has been created now from zero cost to some substantial cost. And this has been a success story, and all of us, ISRO, NSIL, and InSpace, handle the technology transfer in various ways. I would like to conclude saying that we have been really able to create a very vibrant space ecosystem in this country, taking the support from industries. I am very proud to say that we have been working with industries in the past. Almost 400 odd industries benefited from association with us. And we would like to see how this can really grow and create more vibrant space ecosystem, primarily coming out of the architecture that we have created of Department of Space, the clarity of our thought and plan over a long period of time. And of course, the inspiration that has been created by the success of the missions really pushes us to do many more things in the future. But the journey ahead is really tough. One of the important goals which we want to set for ourselves is to create a vibrant user community around what our space services are that are possible. I can tell you that the user community is still to be created more. Today we know the communication segment itself, the user community is limited. Also on the remote sensing data utilization is also limited, and many other areas are there to expand. But this is up to some of the companies and startups that who have an interest in working on space to come up and find out. And we are there to help you. And it's really an exciting time for all of us. I'm very happy to share this information and this outlook of us in terms of the space vision and the engagement with our private companies in the Department of Space. And thank you so much, and I'm open to any further questions.